The Sioux City Strangler drove, windows down, cigarette lit, listening to the rock station at a moderate volume. It was 6:30 p.m., and the radio man gave listeners the lowdown on a traffic incident involving a large commercial truck carrying office furniture somewhere on US 65 North. He cruised the streets, feeling a bead of sweat form on the back of his neck as the sun beat down on him. He could see that the clock was ticking, the hours still counting down toward darkness, but it seemed like nobody had bothered to tell the sun, still up there, raining down on everyone below. After circling the block, the Sioux City Strangler stopped his machine a few doors down from Tony's Tavern. The sign outside said, "Try our world-famous cheeseburger," in large block letters written in red, white, and blue chalk. So he decided he would take the advice the sign offered him. Inside, Tony's Tavern was lit up like a Christmas tree with neon signs featuring idiotic slogans about having a good time, letting your cares go, and drinking Budweiser. So again, he did what the sign told him to when the barkeep in the soiled apron came around to take his order. "Give me one of those world-famous cheeseburgers and a Budweiser, won't you, Chief?" He didn't stick around Tony's very long, though he sat there longer than he'd wanted to. He watched the sun go down through the red-stained glass, taking in the stream of college-age kids pouring in through the door, stupid smiles plastered on their faces, mouths laughing and teeth showing over nothing at all. "Any other bars around here?" the Sioux City Strangler asked the barkeep, who looked to be about the same age. The barkeep took a look around and flashed the guy a knowing smile. "Yeah, pal, I hear ya," he said. "You could try Green's Pub, more working-class kind of guys like us." The Sioux City Strangler smiled. "Thanks, but, pubs don't tend to attract too many women in my experience, know what I mean? At least not single ones." The barkeep smiled again and raised his eyebrows. "Oh, I gotcha, okay, man. The Satin horse might be a little more your style tonight then, friend." The guy gave him a wink and a playful punch on the shoulder. The Sioux City Strangler took out his wallet and laid down a few bills for his burger and the 2 buds he'd sucked down. "For the good advice," said the Sioux City Strangler, slipping a $5 bill into the barkeep's hand. "Shit, thanks, man," said the barkeep. "Come back any time, won't ya?" "Not a fucking chance in hell," thought the Sioux City Strangler as he gave the barkeep with the black hair and Greek-looking complexion a thumbs up. Outside, he lit a cigarette and walked to his car. The sun was down now, finally, and the night was warm and soft and sweet. The Satin horse was calling his name, and it was less than a mile away. This is the story of the Sioux City Strangler, a man who terrorized the great state of Iowa for nearly 10 years before making his way to California for a little fun in the sun and a fresh crop of citizens to terrorize. I'm your host, Mary Buckley, and you're listening to Sioux City Strangler, the podcast. The Satin horse was nearly the opposite of Tony's Tavern. From the outside, the only thing that might tell you were looking at a bar was the drunk swaying back and forth, holding an unlit cigarette between his teeth, waiting on something that would never come. Inside, the Satin horse was dark, really dark. There were black bar stools and dark floors made from knotted old wood that surely looked like shit with the lights up. Blue music played over speakers mounted up near the ceiling in the far corners of the bar. Soft-breathing saxophones mixed with brushed drums and endless walking bass lines filled the room. The whole place had a red glow, lit only by Venetian candle holders on the tops of the tables and spread haphazardly along the wood plank bar. There were just 4 people in the place if you didn't count the drunk outside. 2 of those people appeared to be musicians setting up a small, worn drum kit and silently fingering a big upright bass in the corner. The piano pushed up against the wall was still waiting for somebody to sit down at the bench and lift the lid covering the keys. The Sioux City Strangler sat down at the bar, though there was nobody behind it to serve him. He checked the clock, which read 8:37, listening to the Gentlemen's Club jazz play over the speakers and scanning the bottles set up behind the bar. He didn't feel like drinking beer anymore. He lit a cigarette with the flame from one of the candle holders on the bar, a slick move he thought he saw on TV, but now he wasn't so sure where he picked it up. Tired of waiting, he quietly rapped his knuckles on the bar, hoping to attract somebody who could pour some liquor into a glass for him. A skinny black guy in glasses and a perfectly pressed black suit came out from behind a door the Sioux City Strangler hadn't noticed until that moment. He approached the bar and lifted the flip-up counter, stopping to readjust one of the bottles with his left hand before lowering the piece of wood in his other without making a sound. "I thought I was going to have to climb back there and get my own drink," said the Sioux City Strangler as the bartender approached. The barkeep lit a cigarette he already had between his fingers with a pewter table lighter stashed behind the bar. "No need for that," he said. "I'm here to help, just had some business in the back." "That's a nice lighter," said the Sioux City Strangler, admiring the big piece of pewter the man had placed up on the bar top. Only then did he realize the lighter was shaped like an M26 lemon hand grenade. The barkeep smiled. "Nothing nice about it, boss," he said. "War as hell." "Why do you keep it behind the bar, then?" "As a reminder, man. Just as a reminder. Now what can I get you to drink?" You strike me as a man that can make a decent Manhattan, huh?" "You're goddamn right on that one," said the barkeep, blowing a large cloud of smoke into the air. "Okay then," said the Sioux City Strangler, putting his butt out in the ashtray. "Old Overholt if you got it." "Oh, I got it," said the man. "One mean old Overholt Manhattan coming your way." The Sioux City Strangler pulled another cigarette from his pack and held it up by his face. "Mind if I try out that lighter while you work?" he asked, "before you put it back behind the bar?" The barkeep looked him in the eyes, taking something in, analyzing something about the big white guy on the other side of the bar. "You go on right ahead," he said. "I bet you know how to make one of those light right up." We'll be right back after this message.
Say so long to broken toasters and faulty power supplies that won't power up your favorite gadgets anymore. Say hello to Big Mike and Big Mike's Electronic Supplies, taking the guesswork out of finding the parts you need to get your tech up and running. We've got everything from resistors and capacitors to custom-made power supplies. We can even help you find hard-to-source and obscure parts for vintage electronics from the 1970s and 1980s. Get that vintage synthesizer up and running and hear that beautiful mid-century blender whir again with the right parts from Big Mike's Electronic Supplies. Sioux City Strangler listeners can get 15% off up to $100 on orders placed in the next 30 days. Use code STRANGLER to save big at Big Mike's Electronic Supplies today.
The Sioux City Strangler took a big gulp of his Manhattan, confirming that the guy in the glasses with the hand grenade lighter could in fact make a mean drink. He took another slug and stubbed out his cigarette in the red glass ashtray. The bar was still empty, but people were starting to stream in, smiling and laughing and well-dressed. The men were in suits mostly, though many had on short-sleeved knit shirts with their jackets slung over their shoulders. It was still hot outside, and he couldn't blame them. His own jacket was riding the bar stool he sat on, hanging off the back, waiting for a cool breeze to make itself useful. The women all wore colorful dresses that reminded him of something Maria might wear on one of their movie dates. Form-fitting without being tight, casual yet elegant, perfect for the warm weather outside. Every woman who walked through the door had every hair on her head perfectly in place. One thing he did notice about the bar was that almost everybody who came in was black. There was one white couple, but they seemed to be friends with everyone, hugging and shaking hands and exchanging cheek kisses with the bartender and the band and the patrons. Nobody spoke to him except the bartender, though he didn't receive any dirty looks either. He might as well have just been another empty bar stool. As the night went on, the place got busier and the band, who started playing around 9, got louder and looser. The drummer was drinking beer, often keeping time with just his right hand, a Pabst Blue Ribbon bottle in his left. The bass player kept a cigarette lit at all times, often lighting one with the other during breaks between songs. The Sioux City Strangler slowed down on the Manhattans and eventually switched back to beer, wanting to keep a level head. He was there to hunt, after all, and he was hungry, starving for a little action. He wasn't about to get caught because he was too drunk to finish the job and let one get away, running straight to the cops with a clear picture of his face and car in her mind. By 11 p.m., though, the Sioux City Strangler realized that the Satin horse wasn't the place to pick up the perfect victim. Sure, there were women, but they were all there with men. Even worse, they were with young men his age who could and would put up a fight. Shit, some of these guys were probably in the war and well-trained to fuck up any asshole that messed with their girl. The Sioux City Strangler didn't leave the Satin horse right away, though. Instead, he sat there seething, smoking cigarette after cigarette, wondering just what in the hell he was going to do. He had another day of meetings with doctors to talk about pills, and his first appointment was bright and early at 8 a.m. It had been the only time the doc could meet, and he was in the business of being accommodating. Around midnight, when the band stopped playing and the patrons started filing out the door, the Sioux City Strangler made his way back to his Pontiac, another cigarette in his hand. He sat there in his car, smoking with the window down and the engine running, watching the happy people stand outside, chatting, making plans for dinners and future parties, and talking about how tired they'd be at work the next day, but it was worth it. As he stared at them, blowing smoke out of his nose, he turned on his brights and hit the gas. He revved the engine, a dozen or so people turning to look his way, using their hands to shield their eyes from his high beams. He hit the gas harder and his machine roared. His was no Satin horse. It was a chrome stallion pumping out 400 horsepower with the RPM meter in the red. He laughed, loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear him before turning up the radio, turning it up fucking loud, a commercial for hamburgers spilling out onto the sidewalk. He'd hoped for some hard-hitting rock and roll, but the message was the same. Do you see me now? The majority of the crowd dispersed slowly, though some single men stayed, unafraid of the white boy and the loud Pontiac and his theatrics. After a minute of revving his engine, the Sioux City Strangler backed up and peeled out hard, tires squealing on the still warm asphalt. He threw a cigarette out the window and over the roof of his car in the general direction of the remaining crowd. He headed toward the Hollywood Hacienda, simultaneously satisfied with himself and pissed that he hadn't done what he set out to do. He laughed to himself, thinking about the scene, but his laughter had a hint of anger in it, the sound rising from his throat choked and harsh. As he approached the motel, he stepped on the gas, pushing his Pontiac up to 60 miles per hour. He took a hard right at the light as it turned red, unsure of where he was headed, but not quite ready to go back to his motel room. He turned up the radio again, and Motherless Children by Eric Clapton filled the car and spilled out onto the deserted street. He was headed south, though he didn't know that, reinvigorated by the rock and roll and the promise of a little late-night fun. The Sioux City Strangler laughed again, this time in earnest. If you want action, you gotta find action. He couldn't remember where he'd heard that piece of man's man wisdom, but it didn't matter anyway. He reached for the radio and cranked the knob, the speakers rattling the dash and beginning to distort. If you want action, you gotta find action. We'll be right back after this word from Gas Saver Fuel Additives.
The open road is calling your name, but out-of-control gas prices aren't doing you any favors. Gas Saver Fuel Additives can keep your car running smoothly and save you big bucks as you rack up the miles. Designed with a proprietary formula the competition just can't crack, Gas Saver Unleaded, High Performance, and Diesel Fuel Additives are in a league of their own. Show the road no mercy and burn rubber by putting Gas Saver Fuel Additives in your car or truck today.
The radio man came on telling everyone it was 30 minutes past midnight now. Most men would have turned around and circled back to the motel for a little shut-eye. 8 a.m. and that morning meeting would come soon, too soon. But in the moment, the ticking clock just didn't matter. The Sioux City Strangler lit another cigarette and continued driving, taking random turns, twisting and turning through town. The streets were relatively empty, with only a few cars visible in the distance as he drove. He pulled into a gas station, a brightly lit place with a flying horse on the sign. Fucking horses, he thought to himself, thinking of his time at the Satin Horse and the little scene he'd created out on the street. He left his cigarette smoking in the tray and headed in. You know where I can find some girls? The Sioux City Strangler was standing in front of the attendant, a short man with a red face in a maroon shirt and a red hat. The man desperately needed a shave. Sorry, pal, I just got gasoline here. The attendant smirked like he was sick of the question, like every dude who wandered in past midnight asked the same thing. Come on, buddy, said the Sioux City Strangler, swaying a little bit, acting drunker than he was. He pulled a cigarette out of his pocket, fumbling with the pack for added effect. No, buddy, I don't do that kind of thing. Okay, said the Sioux City Strangler, showing off his big smile now. Can I get a pack of Winstons? Those I got, said the man. You want any gas? He thought about it, knowing he had half a tank and that topping off wouldn't hurt. He declined, however, figuring that he might need to stop in at another service station, hopefully with a guy behind the counter that knew how to have fun. Back in his car, the Sioux City Strangler drove, taking a series of turns that put him in an area that felt even more desolate. He noticed that the buildings were getting bigger, more industrial. He passed train tracks long out of service and a lot full of empty semi-trucks waiting for a load. He continued driving, circling a dozen or so blocks, driver's side window cracked, radio low, cigarette lit. There were no signs of life anywhere except the radio man coming on to let all of Des Moines know that it was now 1 a.m. The Sioux City Strangler felt his anger grow, bubbling up inside of him, that familiar feeling returning. His teeth clenched and he gripped the steering wheel tighter. He drove a little faster now, taking turns harder, accelerating into them like one might on a twisting highway late at night. His simmering anger was fast approaching a rolling boil. The Sioux City Strangler drove back toward the Hollywood Hacienda, though he had no intention of parking, turning off his machine, and going to bed like a good boy. He knew he might not find what he was looking for, but it wouldn't be for lack of effort. He passed the motel, rolling down the window and tossing a cigarette butt in its general direction. He slowed and scanned the lot, looking for activity, but there was none. The Sioux City Strangler drove for another hour, going back and forth between the industrial area and his motel, taking a slightly different route each time. He explored alleyways and circled public parks, places that were often hotbeds of illegal activity late at night. As he drove by the same gas station where he'd bought cigarettes earlier in the night, that same pack now about half empty, he saw what looked like a human figure in the distance. He slowed his vehicle down, pointing his headlights into the darkness. The figure seemed to be walking toward the industrial part of town with a slight limp. He drove slowly, creeping along, keeping a good distance between his car and the prey he was stalking, now clearly visible as an older man. He watched as the man limped at a steady pace. If you want action, you gotta find action, he said to himself, turning the car radio back on, increasing the volume. He banged his high beams on and stepped on the gas, his tires squealing, his machine coming to life. 200 yards, 100 yards, 100 feet, and then he was on the guy. He was going fast now, and he could see that the man had salt and pepper hair beneath a blue baseball cap. He was dressed in work boots and coveralls, a lightweight baby blue jacket up top. He made a beeline for the man who had turned around to see what the bright light and furious sound coming his way was. The man knew it was a car, of course, but something didn't feel right. The car had come out of nowhere, and the engine was banging out a double-time rhythm that tore a hole through the quiet night. The Sioux City Strangler smiled and exhaled a lungful of smoke, both hands on the wheel, the Winston between his teeth. The windows were up and the radio was on. Can't Get Enough by Bad Company spilled out of the speakers. He was 50 feet away, then 25, his white Pontiac barreling down on the man. The Sioux City Strangler braced for impact, but at the last second he cranked the wheel hard to the left, missing the man who had fallen to his knees from fear by no more than a couple of feet. Like a race car driver who just narrowly avoided hitting the wall on a tight turn, the Sioux City Strangler pounded the brakes, his car now sideways in the road. He stared at the man, now sitting on the ground, spooked and dumbfounded, watching to see what he'd do. Instinctively, he turned off his headlights and put out his cigarette. The man in the work boots and coveralls and the stupid baby blue jacket didn't move. The Sioux City Strangler put his machine into park and stepped on the gas, giving an encore of his performance at the Satin horse. His machine roared and spit, and the Sioux City Strangler turned his lights back on, reaching for the brights to put a little extra fear into the fucker. He revved his engine, took his foot off the gas, and hit the horn. He started laughing then, surprised that he'd reached for the horn, but delighted with himself, his flair, his creativity. "Get out of the way, you're blocking the road," he yelled, his window still up, the radio still playing. "Get out of the goddamn way!" He held the horn down, now flashing his brights at the man, laughing like an escaped head case, his white teeth fully exposed. Suddenly, the headlights went off, and the Sioux City Strangler sped away, pushing 90 miles an hour, driving on the wrong side of the road. He hit a turn hard and was out of sight, flipping his headlights back on and slowing his vehicle to a cool 45. If you want action, you gotta find action. Scaring some poor bastard in the middle of the night wasn't the kind of action he really wanted. But having to drag some old fat fuck into no man's land at 2 a.m. wasn't it either. And he certainly didn't want to deal with the damage to his beloved Pontiac. At 2:22, the Sioux City Strangler parked that Pontiac in front of his room at the Hollywood Hacienda. He undressed quietly after turning on the television, though he paid no attention to what was on the screen. After brushing his teeth, he climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to his waist. He reached for the phone to call Maria, even though it was after 2:30 a.m. now. The Sioux City Strangler lit a cigarette and inhaled deeply, listening to the phone ring, thinking of Maria in bed. He almost hung up, worried about waking Maria from a deep slumber, but he let it ring instead. After about a minute, Maria picked up the receiver mounted on the kitchen wall. She was dressed in yellow pajamas and a blue bathrobe. She couldn't find the matching slippers. "Hello? Hey, I can't sleep." Oh, well, okay. I was a little worried. Nothing to worry about, just a restless night on the road. You never call me this late. I know, I usually sleep pretty well. I'm usually pretty tired after all the driving and the meetings, you know? Half a beer and I'm out most nights. Maria smiled on the other end of the line. Maybe it's the heat. It's hot here. Is it hot there? It is hot. I took a jacket with me tonight when I went to get dinner. I should have taken a towel to dry off all the sweat. Maria laughed a sleepy laugh. With an outstretched leg, she reached out to pull one of the kitchen chairs over toward the phone so she could sit down. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. "I should have gone for a drive or something." No, it's okay, I promise. Who else would you call if not me, right? Right. You need your sleep, though. I'll get it. Now, tell me about your night. What did you do? What did you eat for dinner? I worry that you just eat garbage when you're out there. Me? I would never. I had a very healthy dinner. I ate tomatoes. I ate lettuce. I even ate potatoes. Burger and fries, huh? Well, yeah. I did have some beer, though. Growing boys need beer. Yeah, sure they do. I think they're giving it to the kids at school now. I think I heard that on the news. These kids these days, they've got it so good. When I was a kid, I had to drink milk. Can you believe that? Honest to God, milk right there in the school cafeteria. How did they expect me to turn out? Uh-huh, no wonder. So, what did you do after you ate your burger? There was a short pause now as the Sioux City Strangler thought about how to put it into words. Well, the bartender recommended a place that I might like better. You know, at the place where I got the burger, the crowd was a little... not my scene. You know, those kids that drink beer in school, too young. So I went to this other place called the Satin Horse. Sounds fancy. I hope you're not having too much fun without me. No, definitely not. Anyway, this place was kind of interesting, kind of fun maybe. It was a jazz bar. The band was playing jazz music. You at a jazz bar? The cheeseburger and fries and beer, I believe. You lost me at jazz. I didn't know it was a jazz bar. I'm not sure I would have gone if I knew that, but I don't know. It was an all right time. I'm not sure if the band was good or not, though. Don't ask me. I don't get jazz. Me neither. Silence crept into the conversation now, and Maria yawned audibly, unable to turn her face away from the receiver in time. Hey, maybe we should both go to bed, he said. I have to get up early, and I know you must be tired. I feel a little bit better, and I'm kind of tired again. The couple exchanged I love yous, and the line went dead. The Sioux City Strangler held the receiver to his ear and listened to the dial tone. After hanging up the phone, he lit another cigarette and sat on the bed in silence, the light of the television screen filling the room. There was nothing on the screen but static, frantic dead air, a chaotic black and white motif with no discernible repetition. The Sioux City Strangler inhaled deeply, holding the smoke in his lungs before blowing it out of his mouth in tight rings. He stared at the screen without blinking. The clock ticked over to 3 a.m. Sleep was still nowhere in sight. Sioux City Strangler the podcast is a Past Due production and was recorded in sunny Los Angeles, California at Past Due Studios. This episode was written by Christopher Chase Godwin. Theme music was written and performed by Michael Wegner. Additional music by Michael Wegner and Christopher Chase Godwin. Storyblocks and Epidemic Sound also provided music for this episode. Dialogue editing services were provided by Janet Berry. Additional editing by Karl Weiss at Past Due Studios. Mixing by Tommy Singh. Audio mastering provided by Renee Rojas. Katrina Moan is the executive producer. Want to learn more about the Sioux City Strangler? Visit SiouxCityStrangler.com today. You can also find special merchandise like coffee mugs, notepads, and rolling papers to add to your collection. This week we have a limited edition poster from the Satin Horse Jazz Club available in our store. You can find it online at SiouxCityStrangler.com and WeArePastDue.com. A big thank you to our returning sponsors Big Mike's Electronics Supplies and Gas Saver Fuel Additives. Use our promo code SCS to save 10% on your first order at Big Mike's Electronics Supplies through the end of the month. Subscribe to Sioux City Strangler the podcast wherever you listen today to hear new episodes as soon as they're available. We'll be back next week for episode 4.